Hey guys, Erpleeple here. Welcome to my Bass Essentials class, which is going to be a video on my take on replacing your bass with a separate low end. And there's a lot of videos on this. A lot of them recommend using a simple sine wave. When you use a simple sine wave, not only is it not going to translate to smaller speaker systems because it doesn't have any harmonic content, it also isn't going to have a vibe to it. So when you think about creating a sub for your song, you want to think about what is the vibe of the song and how can my sub enhance that vibe? So we're going to listen to 3 examples from music of mine. The first is the song In Love off of my last EP. All right, so in this entire song, even later in this piano breakdown, I have a consistent sustained bass, a replacement low end. And what is that exactly? Well, it's filtered very low. I just made this on my Moog. So if we listen to it unfiltered, and it's being run through my tube compressor to give it kind of a lot of juicy life. So this is a very dirty sound. I wanted something that when filtered low was still going to have a really rich, thick vibe to it. I wanted that to impart that characteristic into my song, and I actually used this in that entire EP. It was always my replacement sub, was this same kind of dirty Moog bass, low filtered. So don't let people tell you that you have to use absolutely a clean replacement sub, but that's an example from this song. Let's go take a look at another song. For the second song we'll be looking at, we'll be going over my remix of Dokes' Dirt single. So let's listen to the chorus really quick in the master. So if we listen to the sub at the end when it plays just with the vocals, it's a very massive sounding sub and it has a really dark and deep energy. The song itself was very dark. So when I was doing the remix, I really wanted to accentuate that. What the bass is, it's really simple. It's just a triple VCO set to sawtooths. It really is nothing special. A low cutoff and a good healthy amount of glide so the notes glide into each other. And Diva has a very dark and deep vibe to it. So you get you get these really kind of huge dark sub sounds. So that's another example where I took a completely different approach to fit the vibe of the song. And for the most part, this is layering under all the layers of vocal melody and pads, and it's sort of just adding a rich underbelly to all of that. All right, so let's go take a look at the third song now. For our third and final song, we'll be looking at a collab I'm doing with Istrite under our SFACT project that we also heard a little bit of in a previous tutorial on sidechaining dynamic EQs. So let's listen to the part that we're going to look at the bass on. So if we solo the bass, we can see that it's 2 layers. So when I initially got this from Istrite, he wrote this really great bass part that I love, and it was just this 808. It was heavily saturated, so we can listen to that. And I kind of wanted a bit more of a jazzy feel to the bass, so I made a bass on my microKORG. It was just a filtered square wave, which we can hear here. And so what I thought is that we could combine the two. So I had high passed his saturated 808 layer, which by itself kind of gives this very spread, saturated top layer to the sort of dirtier, more jazzy, kind of low filtered bass. And I think that worked really well with the vibe of this particular track. So that just goes to show that The vibe is really important when thinking about how you're going to create the sub that sits underneath your music, and it can change from song to song. Now you might be thinking that's great, but I just want a really clean sub that's going to work across all sound systems. How can I do that? Well, let's get into that right now. All right, so how do we make a clean sub that we can use as a replacement? Well, a lot of people tell you to use a sine wave, which sounds like this. It's one fundamental tone with no harmonics. The problem with this is that you're not going to have any upper order harmonics that's going to help it to translate to smaller speaker systems. So I wouldn't recommend this. Instead, I might start with a triangle wave, which is similar to a square wave. You can see in a square wave, it's every other harmonic, but in a triangle wave, it's every other harmonic in a descending order. Now, personally, I'm not that big of a fan of how this sounds on its own. It certainly doesn't sound like the way a triangle does from an analog synthesizer. So we're going to shape some of the harmonics a bit. So we'll dip out a couple of these last ones. And we'll pull some of these extra harmonics down a little bit more, especially these last ones. And that's sounding a lot better. Now, one of these last harmonics I feel like is a little too high still. There we go, that's about right. So you could do something like that. You could even control it a bit more with the filter here. And that's sounding nice. One thing I like to do is to go ahead and remove extra bands because you don't want to create phasing at cutoffs when you don't need to. We'll just spread a little bit with the stereo eyes above the cutoff here. You can solo to the phase there. It's a little funky. So that's a pretty rich and thick sounding bass that's going to work in almost all cases underneath your music. Now, personally, I like using analog synths. So I did actually do this all on my Moog with a triangle wave running through my Vari-Mu tube compressor. So let's flip over to that setup. Here we have a triangle wave that I made on my Moog Mother 32, just a simple analog synth that's monophonic, and I ran it through my tube compressor. And I got a sample, picked out the first zone here, it's set up to play a bass, so we can hear that. And you can see here I'm shaping it down with a filter. And it has some really nice rich harmonic content. It sounds really nice and big. Part of that too is the tube compressor really helps to give it that really warm, juicy flavor. So I've decided to give this analog sub to you guys as a free download. That will be in the description. You'll just have to subscribe to the channel to get the download. Please use it, share it with your friends. And if you have any questions, as always, please comment and I'll be happy to answer them.